Hoosier Nation, to our 103rd episode of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for Indiana University sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday evening, August 27, 2013, where I am your host, Noah Freeman. On the docket for tonight, we never got to talk about a podcast about Anthony Leal commitment with all the recent interviews. So we will very, very, very briefly discuss that before talking about the new basketball assistant coach in Mike Roberts. After that, we'll predict each game for football. Before we dive into our very first preview of 2019, here with me tonight, it's been an exciting few weeks. We're kind of on here. We were all kind of on here talking about the Trick Galloway equipment a few weeks ago. Then we had everyone sort of on for our 100th episode with Crimson Cast. Then had 2 interviews with Anthony Leal and Rashawn Williams. So it's been a real exciting month for the Hoosier Sound. But Nithin, Matt, and I are counting on the excitement with football that's finally starting. It's nice to continue that excitement. So Matt, how are you doing since it's been a minute since we've been able to have you fully on the show?
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been like 3 weeks. It's felt like forever, but I'm excited to be back. A lot of great news going on around the Indiana athletics program. By the way, we're in 2019, not 2013. Noah mentioned that earlier, and I thought it was really funny. So
I forgot to put the date on, and the last date I had was August 13th. So I read 27th, 2013. We went back in time. That's okay. Yeah, I'll keep that bit. I won't edit it out.
The good news is IU football is better now than it was in 2013. So
that's true. That is
so what we're about to talking about is going to be a lot less depressing. So
yes,
good.
Nithin, how are you? Since you were at least able to do one of the interviews, we're going to have you on the second one, but scheduling with Rashawn just kind of went by. It happens. Scheduling happened, and we couldn't actually get you on the Rashawn podcast. But how are you doing, especially since we got you on at least one of the interviews?
No, it's all good. Yeah, technical issues happen. I really enjoyed listening to the Rashawn Williams interview. I think it's somebody that all IU fans should get to know, even if you're just a casual football fan. This guy is one of the, if not the highest rated football recruit that the school has ever had. So before he steps onto campus at this point next year, why don't you take a listen and see if you like the guy?
Yep. I would think all casual listeners, at least of our podcast, that would listen to the weekly show would have already listened to it. But if you don't know who he is, you should definitely look him up.
Well, then spread the word.
Yes, exactly. The top-rated football recruit that Indiana football has, at least since they've been recording rankings, has ever gotten. Top-rated ever recruit. So it was very cool to get him on, and really special. Honestly, when you think about it, he was a bigger get than we'd got compared to Anthony Leal. Even though Leal was obviously going to be much more popular, Rashawn was technically a bigger get since he was the Romeo Langford. Not even, because Romeo Langford wasn't even the top recruit that IU basketball has ever gotten. So speaking of recruits, we haven't gotten to talk about our Anthony Leal commitment. It seems like forever ago. So we're just going to briefly give our very quick scouting report on Leal, just kind of talk about what our thoughts were since we had him on the podcast, had another interview, and then we were here. But just a small, tiny scouting report that I had. You remember he's a 6'5", 195-pound, 4-star shooting guard out of Bloomington South. Top-rated player in Indiana so far for 2020, 96 nationally on 247 composite. Of course, these are as the time of the show is recording, but 8 out of 11 recruits from Archie have been in-state. That includes Joey Brunk. So 7 out of 10 if you don't include Joey, but out of all of the recruits that he's gotten so far, 8 out of 11. The past 5 total have been Indiana players, and if you include Joey, that's been 6. So 6 straight recruits that have been Indiana guys. IU currently moved up to 14th overall for the class of 2020 rankings, but for Leal specifically, some of my strengths that I had for him, he's got a really, really high motor. He had great hustle all the time, dives on the floor for loose balls. He wants to win and really doesn't care what he has to do to achieve that. Even if he gets 0 points and 20 rebounds and 10 assists or whatever, he's going to do what it takes to try and win. He's a competitor, good shooter. And I mean good shooter, literally. He's not an incredible shooter, but he's a good shooter. He's got decent form that we can talk about in a second, but he can space the floor, which he really wants to use in creating better opportunities so that he can get everyone else better at shooting, which I loved when I was listening and hearing about some of that. I like his court vision. He's always looking up, not at the basket. You can always tell that he's trying to get the best possible shot, even if it's not him shooting the ball. But as a junior at Bloomington South, averaged 19.9 points per contest as the Panthers won 24 games. They did advance to the Class 4A semi-state. On the Adidas Gauntlet circuit for Indiana Elite, he shot 50.9% on twos, 35.3% on threes. And this is also with a bad hand, a bad thumb, if you remember some of what he's been going through. But some of the weaknesses that I have written down, he's a decent athlete. I mean, if you're ranked in the like almost close to 100, you're still going to be a good athlete, but he's definitely not a top 10, top 20 type of 5-star athlete, but still got a lot of those nice athletic traits. He does need to improve on the quickness of the athletic ability to compete at the next level. He needs to improve his ball handling at that, especially since he's going to be a guard. Yeah. And I think his mechanics need to just be more consistent. Not that he has poor mechanics. I just personally think they need to be more consistent. He might need a little bit of a wider stance. Right now, he's not jumping real high. His legs are really close together. So if he can just tweak a few small things, and I do mean those as just small tweaks that he can add to his shooting can start to be something that he can really open up, especially as he gets to college and practice more than not very much a day during high school. But do you have anything else to add or disagree with, Matt?
Yeah, sure. I totally agree. He's a natural shooter. I rate him more higher than you do on my list of shooters, even on the team right now. I think if he came on the team right now, he might be the best shooter on the team. He's very natural, very fluid motion. You can tell sometimes when he doesn't have his feet set, it's like it's still going to go in. It's just that motion is so ingrained in his mind and his body. He probably needs some work on defense. Again, I probably say this about every single freshman coming in. They're not going to be physical enough. But with Anthony, I think, like you mentioned earlier, his lateral quickness needs to improve. Not drastically, but definitely there's a large jump from high school defending to college defending, and he's going to have a rough freshman year learning how to do that. And I'm sure Archie will grill him a couple times in practice about not getting across the floor quick enough. But he has good arm length to fit the pack line defense. He's tall enough. He can play multiple positions. He can play almost all the wing positions, the 2 and the 3. He's going to be a very, very pivotal piece to this team in the future. I wouldn't expect him to come in and make splashes in his freshman year. He might play some odd minutes off the bench in his first year, but in the second year as a sophomore, I expect him to probably be a starter and be a key piece of the team. So,
anything else to add, Nithin?
Well, first of all, my main takeaway from our interview with Anthony Leal was that we need to call him Cinnamon Roll going forward, because that guy apparently is a huge fan of cinnamon rolls, and I don't blame him. That was my top takeaway. And as far as what you guys said, this is a top 100 player. And it's funny that you had mentioned some areas of improvement for him, but that just goes to show you the kind of upside that he brings. Yeah. If he can just tweak a couple of things this coming senior season of his, the sky's the limit for this guy. He's a 6'5" player. He seems like a genuinely good person too. And I think all of those kind of things will only help the IU program starting in fall 2020 when he joins the team.
Yep.
Yeah, he's one of those perfect 3 to 4 year players where you get him in. It's like at worst, he's going to be a great rotational piece. And at best, he's going to be, a really good shooter and the star of the team from Bloomington. So,
And, on that note, I would recommend that everyone go to the IndianaHQ.com scholarship page, where we easily lay out for you who will be on the team in the upcoming years. And the good news for Anthony Leal is that he doesn't have to worry about carrying the burden of the weight on his shoulders. He's going to have a guy like Trey Galloway coming in at the same time with him. How about Armand Franklin, who will be there for his sophomore season? Rob Finnessy will be there as well. Demezy Anderson, Race Thompson. It's not like one person has to do everything. And if Trace Jackson Davis does return for a sophomore year next year, I mean, you're now talking about a really dangerous basketball team that's deep as well.
Full of Indiana guys.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. My final thought on Anthony Leal was just, if you watch him play, you can tell he's a around 100 type of recruit, because in some ways you might think, oh, he looks a little awkward when he might be running up and down the court or something. But I think that is just because he's not done growing. I don't think he's done finishing growing into his body. Maybe not in terms of height, but just weight and muscle. And I think he's going to become a real decent athlete, really good athlete that he's going to develop into his body. And I think that just goes to the type of potential that he has. If he's already doing what he's doing in a body that could potentially just get even better and faster and stronger and quicker, that it's going to be cool to see, especially senior season when he still has an entire year left to go through workouts, and let alone for those ranking and recruiting buffs to get higher on the rankings.
Yep.
Let's move on, because this is a jam-packed episode. We apologize for being a very, very jam-packed episode, but the last 2 weeks that we've had interviews, which is amazing. I'd rather have interviews, honestly, because it's great to hear that kind of content from our incoming recruits. But we've got a lot of stuff. Disclaimer, yes, we know the basketball schedule news did come out. We're not going to talk about that this week. We're going to move it to next week, because we have so many things to talk about. It was a very busy week for both football and basketball, as a good thing this past week.
Yep.
Not to mention that the football team has a game this coming weekend, which we can finally say. But let's move on to who won the week. So, Nithin, who won the week this past week for IU Sports?
So, I usually like to try to look at the professional side for this kind of stuff, but to me, there's really no doubt about this week. It's Michael Penix, the kid, the redshirt freshman who is from Florida, but he played last year with IU a few games, and now he's been named the starting quarterback for week 1 and probably beyond. It's a pretty cool moment for this guy. He once upon a time committed to Tennessee, decommitted. Now he's here in Bloomington, and let's get it going. I can't wait for Saturday. On a side note, I was at the volleyball scrimmage back on Saturday. It was an awesome environment at Wilkinson Hall. They start their season this weekend, Friday and Saturday. So if you're around the Bloomington area this holiday weekend, feel free to check them out.
Things are ramping up definitely for everything across campus, especially as students got there yesterday. It's just very, 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 very exciting time. I almost can't contain myself. But especially with the Penix news, we had Crimson Cast on 3 episodes ago for 100th episode, and the one thing that Galen said that he talked about on his podcast also, but that I've really agreed with, was how he talked about whoever starts the first game is really going to be the quarterback through the first 4 games, if not 4 or 5 games, because if you can't beat all of these non-conference opponents, and then Rutgers, discounting obviously Ohio State, if you can't beat them, like, anyone on our quarterbacking staff should be able to beat those teams. So if Ramsey were to be our quarterback, you can't really pull out a starting quarterback that's not necessarily messing up and he's still winning games. So if he were to be the quarterback, he'd probably be the quarterback going into game 5, maybe game 6. And that wouldn't give Michael Penix any opportunity to potentially come in, get his feet wet, because really, yes, we saw a lot of flashes from him last year, but he really didn't get to have significant amount of game time. So being able to get him on this year and get him a bunch of games, especially those quote-unquote cupcake games, as much as IU football can have a cupcake game, that he can finally just get some game reps and hopefully be the quarterback that has the potential that we've all at least hoped to see.
Well, and that's this is, personally, I'll be honest with you. Tom Allen had said a couple of things during media day that kind of caught my attention back in late July. He had said that Peyton Ramsey was the returning starter, and it would take a lot for Michael Penix or Jack Tuttle to beat him out. And clearly that's what Michael Penix did. The other side of it to me is that Allen also said that time of during media day that, frankly, this is going to be a 1 quarterback deal. This is not going to be Michael Penix and Peyton Ramsey going back and forth, or Jack Tuttle coming in the third quarter, taking over 1 or 2 possessions. Some schools have chosen to do that with this week 1 coming up. IU's not going to be one of those teams. So it's going to be Penix's show. Clearly, Tom Allen has a commitment to this idea, and who knows how it's going to play out. There will probably be some early struggles, but the kid's upside is through the roof. So it should be really fun to see how it all plays out.
What were your thoughts when you heard Penix was the starter, Matt?
I was very excited because I did not expect that to be the news coming out of camp. I think I can speak for all of us. We were all assuming it was Ramsey about a week ago. I know we had a
All
talk.
three of us.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think not even just a week ago. Like our entire Slack chat was like, it's gonna be Ramsey, and then lo and behold, it's Penix, which is great. And like I mentioned before, our season's going to be a lot better with Michael Penix starting, and the future of the program is a lot brighter with Michael Penix starting. That means he's grown up into the role. That means they trust him with the offense. It's a new offense for both Ramsey and Penix, so I guess we should have taken that into account when we were talking about this. But look, Penix makes throws that Ramsey can't. He's a quicker decision maker. And we can saw that in the little spurts that he played last year. I think it's going to be wonderful to see him start out against Ball State, and Ball State's the perfect opponent to start out against. I wish it was at home and not at Lucas Oil, so we'd have the home turf backing him. So that's, the neutral site is kind of weird, but yeah, I'm excited to see Penix starting, and the future of the program looks so much brighter now.
Yeah, it's funny. A few weeks ago, I stumbled upon a random radio show in Arizona where Herman Edwards was giving an interview. The current head coach of Arizona State's football team, former Jets coach, former ESPN analyst. So Herman Edwards had said, I think Arizona State's going through a QB battle as well, and he was saying how if a freshman and senior are neck and neck and they're close, and Tom Allen said Penix and Ramsey were close during practice. If it's close, the coach is going to 10 out of 10 times go to the freshman because he's got more years to learn. He's got that upside. He's got, 3 or 4 years of a relationship that he can develop with the head coach. Edwards said, that's the easiest decision that I can make as a coach because I'm always going to go with the young kid if those two players are even. And I know Ramsey's a junior, but he's a redshirt junior. You can kind of draw the similarities there. So I thought that was kind of funny. And Edwards said the senior should be blowing the freshman out of the water. And clearly, if it's close, you can see why Allen and DeBoer chose to go with Penix, who displayed some pretty interesting arm talent last season in the limited amount of time that he played.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think we all thought it would be Ramsey just because Nithin has been at practice. Now, he hasn't been to practice in a little over a week, I think. But when he was there, Ramsey was getting all the team 1 reps. And when you have a quarterback getting basically all of the first team reps, then you would think that would be the guy that goes in there. So, we don't know, obviously, the ins and outs, but Penix has done something to get a head start on that, and thankfully that's early enough to where he can get his sea legs under him during Ball State. I also fully expect him to make some mistakes against Ball State. I don't think that necessarily is going to hinder his potential. I just think that means, hey, he hasn't done most of camp or at least even half of camp under the first team rep, so he's still got to develop chemistry with everyone, especially as a freshman. So I think it's okay if he doesn't perform like our wildest expectations on Saturday, because I think he's going to have maybe some over exaggerated expectations coming on Saturday, which we'll get to against Ball State. Because I think
I'm sure he's going to be nervous as well.
Yes.
Like going into it, it's your first start as a redshirt freshman. Like I'm sure the nerves are going to be crazy for them. So.
Yeah.
And just touching on the practice thing for a second, I wonder if maybe the coaches wanted Ramsey to run the show during practice, during fall camp, to see what he was capable of doing, to see if he could really impress the coaching staff, especially first-year offensive coordinator Kalen DeBoer. And perhaps after the 3 weeks, the coaching staff said, hey, after what we've seen, Ramsey and Penix are neck and neck. Let's go with the kid. Let's go with the upside. Who's the guy who's healthy finally, which is great to hear after his knee injury last season. He's 100%. He's good to go. Now let's get the show on the road.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood. But yeah, it's great to see him coming in. We'll get to talk a little bit more about him against Ball State, but let's move into more basketball news. So we finally had an assistant coach hire. I wish it would have been a little earlier so that we could have had some content over the summer hours to talk about instead of right before football season. But nonetheless, Mike Roberts, of course, as everyone has now listened to a bunch of podcasts, interviews, and stuff where we'll give our 2 cents. But of course, Assembly Call had their podcast right after it was announced. They did an incredible job of breaking that down. So definitely listen to that. But a little bit of a resume background for Mike Roberts. If you didn't know much about him, he went to high school in Eugene, Oregon. Well, first he grew up in Indiana. That's where his Indiana background kind of started. But then he went to high school in Eugene, Oregon before going to the New Hampshire Hampshire school in New Hampton school. I'm sorry, in New Hampshire. He was a walk-on from 01 to 05 at IU. Then he was a grad assistant for Coach Knight at Texas Tech from 05 to 06. And if I remember correctly, I think he was recruited by Knight, but then did not play under him. So he had a connection, but then went there to Texas Tech for a year as a grad assistant after he graduated. Then he was on staff started out as a video coordinator with Coach Ben Braun at California from 06 to 08. Then he moved with Ben Braun, Coach Braun, to Rice, and he was the assistant coach at Rice with Braun from 08 to 12. And then most recently, as everyone knows, he is now was the assistant coach at UNGC from 2012, just up until a few weeks ago. Some of the accolades that he had, especially at UNGC, he helped UNGC have 20-plus win seasons the last 3 years, which, if you don't know much about those satellite schools at North Carolina, they're pretty good, but UNGC has not been very good recently. 2017 to 2018, they reached the tournament for the first time in 17 years. Last year, they were a number 1 seed at the NIT tournament, so 2 great years. He has some NBA draft, some NBA player coaching ability, not much, but he has coached 3 draft picks. Ryan Anderson, who went to the Orlando Magic in 2008 as the 21st overall pick. Devin Harden to the Seattle Supersonics in 2008 as the 50th overall pick, and then Arslan Kamizi to the Washington Wizards in 2013 as the 54th pick. No, all of those players did not end up being superstars, but he has still coached even a little bit of NBA talent, and for him being so young, that's still quite a resume as an assistant coach so far. But first reactions, I think I had a different first reaction until I started to read and listen more about Mike Roberts. But what was the first thing you thought about Matt, and then did your opinion change over time?
Yeah, I originally was like, meh. He's a guy known for UNGC is known for their defense, not their offense, and I kind of wanted a guy to come in that had a little bit more of an offensive mind, somebody along the lines of not John Beeline, but like somebody that John Beeline would look at, something that would reinvigorate the offense for the basketball team. I was kind of like, but then I heard, oh, he's an Indiana guy. I was like, okay, maybe it's okay. And then I really looked into what he did at UNGC, and I was like, all right, I kind of get it, and I kind of see the hire. A little bit underwhelming, but jury's out. I'd love for him to prove out to be a great, valuable assistant for the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I think both of you guys have said UNGC like 8 times. It's UNC.
And CG. Okay,
UNC Greensboro. It's all good. Just in case we have some Greensboro natives listening, we don't want them to get all
punching their TV screens.
Yeah,
right now.
Right. Yeah, we are not liable for any sort of electronic damage. So, as far as Mike Roberts goes, I like a couple of things about this move, and frankly, the unsexiness of it is kind of what made me like this decision. In all honesty, it wasn't a popular name. It kind of showed me that IU really did their homework as far as this move, especially when you consider the amount of time it took to make the decision. Roberts, first of all, UNC Greensboro has been a really, really solid mid-major team the last couple of years. They have really impressed, in a pretty tough SoCon, the Southern Conference, pretty good. Wofford is in it. Davidson's in it. Wofford last year, I think, won an NCAA tournament game. This is the conference that Greensboro is in, very competitive. The thing that Mike Roberts did there, it seems like he was responsible for player development, and Archie Miller called that out during his press conference a few days ago. And that's, to me, currently the biggest issue I have with Archie Miller and his coaching staff to this point. I wanted someone to be hired that takes, players from point A, where they come in, and really elevate them during the offseason, within the season. And if Mike Roberts can do that, this is going to be a home run move. We'll see what actually happens. But, with all these young guys coming in, Trace Jackson Davis, Armand Franklin, we talked about, Rob Finnessy's only in his sophomore year. And then the 2 in the 2020 freshmen coming in, That's going to be very exciting to see what Mike Roberts can do. And then you add into the fact he's an Indiana guy, Terre Haute native. He's played in the Big Ten before. He's familiar with the conference. Then, okay, this seems like it checks a lot of the boxes, if not all of them. Now let's get to winning basketball games.
Mm-hmm. I kind of had the same reaction Matt had at the beginning. I was like, oh, okay. It was a meh. But as I started to read a little more about him, research him a little more, listen about people's thoughts, and more read kind of what a lot of the beat writers have researched and talked to like other coaches that really know him, my attitude definitely started to change around his how I thought about the hire. First, if you're someone that still isn't sold on the hire, Indiana was never going to get this splash recruit or coach for a bunch of different reasons. And one of the first ones was, of course, they were late into the game. They were months after the main recruiting cycles have already gone through, and it's a lot harder than you might think. Even, yes, Indiana is a school that is a top tier school. It's like, yes, Indiana, the name speaks for itself. Every coach should want to come coach at Indiana, but there are a lot of different factors. Like someone might have a family that they've had there that they don't want to move their kids and uproot their family. Maybe other coaches that you would have gotten just moved into a program and they just started developing relationships. They don't want to move again. Just talked about relationships. You start to develop relationships maybe in the Midwest or the East Coast or the West Coast or the South or something like that. It's hard to keep uprooting your life and trying to change all of these different relationships that you have, especially as you start to develop your own specific streamline of people. So that alone was going to get it was going to be harder for Indiana to pick exactly who they might want if compared to maybe having and hiring an assistant coach during the normal recruiting cycle. But then I really liked what the assembly call talked about. And they mentioned, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Jared or Andy, I think, said something like, do you really know the assistant coaches on many programs? Like, if I were to ask you right now, who are the assistant, not even the assistant coaches, the assistant coaches, not the associate head coach on Minnesota or Rutgers or Maryland, then go to even like Texas or like Florida or just other random schools. Most people couldn't name even the associate coach, the second guy in command, let alone the assistant coaches, the third and fourth guys. So really, we weren't going to have this big splashy player that everyone might have wanted. And I also loved hearing that people really wanted an IU guy, and we finally got an IU guy. And then some people on social medias were like, but not this IU guy. So as I started to read more into it, the type of player, coach, I keep saying player, the type of coach he is, how he's, man, I heard the term, I think, mean guy, but in like a good way at practice. Like he's gonna he's gonna be the kind of guy that gets the team to do things. The guy that's gonna basically get you to run sprints, and he's not gonna take no for an answer if it's not good enough. He's gonna keep going, and he's a hard nosed guy. He's a hard worker. He's gonna put in the hours, put in the time, and that's Indiana basketball. That's what the name brand is. That's what we want to get back towards. So even just from a cultural standpoint, I think from face value, he's definitely a good hire. We'll have to see. The verdict will be out to see if he's a great hire or not. But also in the end, are we really going to know if he does very much? Because you could probably speculate things like maybe before Ed Schilling was, I guess, sort of let go. No one could really point to it saying, "Oh, Archie loses the game." It's still under Archie's name. Archie's going to win the games. He's going to lose the games for the umbrella of everyone else. So we'll have to see.
On that note, I think it might be one of those things that you don't really notice in the moment.
Yes.
I think it's one of those things that right now we're talking about all these, all his sort of past places that he's gone to. This might be a situation where if Mike Roberts gets a head coaching job in a couple of years somewhere else, that's one way that he really made a good impact. If you see, for example, Steve McLean was an assistant coach at IU a few years ago when Tom Crean was the head coach. IU had a couple of good seasons. Steve McLean got named head coach to UIC. That's how McLean did a good job. I think it's the same kind of thing with Mike Roberts here at IU.
Yes, definitely. Especially since he's the 3rd/4th assistant coach on the team. It's it's not a guy that's going to get a lot of publicity. And I think at face value, like we've all said, we kind of thought it was a meh hire at the beginning, but we started to like it. And sure, it could be the offseason talking, but I really like the stuff that I was seeing from him.
I'm sorry. I did not think this was a meh hire in the beginning. I said that's what the lack of sex appeal is what made this a good hire right away. So now, but if he fails, I'll take the accountability for that. But I like this move from the moment, from the start.
Yeah, I just wanted somebody with more offensive specialty, but
yeah, which I think everyone else did. Yes, I think everyone did. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see if that's going to be a coaching thing or a personnel thing or whatever. But before we move on to the next segment of our show, more or less, are you subscribed to our show yet? You can subscribe to our show for free on whatever platforms you listen to podcasts. You can just search for the Hoosier Sound or hang with us live on YouTube Tuesday evenings, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Follow us on Twitter, especially. That's where we get our updates, especially if we're at the last second. Hey, we got this interview. It's going to be at a different time. Come check us out at the Hoosier Sound or at Indiana HQ, both for Twitter and Facebook. Follow us there for the news, updates. Then check our website. Everything's all there one place, indianahq.com. All right, the next portion of the show is a really fun segment. I look forward to this each year because we only get to do it twice a year. We haven't done it as much for football recently, but Matt and I started this when the Hoosier Sound was very young with basketball. So each year we're going to go game by game and basically predict the outcome for football and basketball so that we can kind of see how close we get to correctly guessing the entire season and the entire overall record. We shall start keeping records so that next year we can see like, oh, Nithin's also here this time, and we can try and see how close we got. But we're going to go game by game. We're not going to go too in depth about each game specifically. Matt and Nithin already did that a few episodes ago, so go back in the history, check it out. It's definitely still going to be relevant. Probably the only thing that's going to have changed is our starting quarterback. So when they talk about if it's going to be Ramsey or Penix, now we know the answer. But first of all, before we get into this, do you think your overall record has changed now that the starting quarterback is Penix? Nithin, yes or no?
Funny, I don't think so. No.
Matt?
Absolutely.
I don't think so much either. I don't think in the grand scheme of records, I don't think it is. But I think the floor has been raised and the ceiling has also been raised. If he can stay healthy.
Mine has changed. So
Okay. Mine has not changed. It'll stay the same. I did this before the QB was announced, and I'll probably keep it the same. But first game, Lucas Oil Ball State this weekend, Saturday, 12 o'clock noon on, I don't know why they did this. They hype up Lucas Oil, and then they put it on CBSSN to where most people that aren't at the game can't watch it. Anyway, Lucas Oil Ball State, first game, technically an away game, but not really. I have it as a win. I don't think it's a trap game. It could be a trap game. I don't think it will be. I think Indiana's going to be able to do its job. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, for a while I expected it to be a trap game. For a while I was like, this is going to be confusing. But then I actually researched Ball State's offensive situation, and I went, this is the best defense they're going to play all year. And it's the first game of the season, and they have a new starting quarterback. Like, this is going to be rough. So I'm going to say it's a win for us.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a win too. Let's be fair. This is Ball State's Super Bowl to an extent. I mean, this is their biggest game of the year, and Tom Allen said as much during his press conference a couple of days ago. Actually, it was yesterday. That would have been on Monday for those of you listening later in the week. Basically, he said, look, we know that Ball State's going to come out for us. We know that they're going to play hard. We know they're going to play aggressive. And frankly, this is the first game of the season for IU. So there are going to be some bumps, some rustiness, some whatever. With that said, maybe it's close for a couple quarters. I think eventually, though, IU will wear down Ball State enough to get a pretty comfortable win.
You talk about bumps and bruises and first game of the season. If college football is indicative of the Florida-Miami game that happened on Saturday, then we're in for a real rough weekend overall. But remember, it's basically you always hear the NFL, the first 3 weeks of the entire NFL is an extension of the preseason, and they have preseason games. College football doesn't have preseason games, so it's not going to be pretty for anyone. But Eastern Illinois is September 7th at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on BTN. Thank you, BTN, for getting it to a better network. Matt mentioned earlier about Penix wishing the Ball State game was at home so we could see Penix. I think if Penix does even like a decent job against Ball State, maybe that'll get more fans out for the Eastern Illinois game, hopefully for the opening game, because the opponent, of course, is not very flashy. I'll use as a word, but 3:30 BTN. Or do you have any doubts at all against Eastern Illinois?
No,
No.
I don't. This is an Eastern team that is, I mean, they're usually thorny in the FCS over the last few years, over the last decade or two. It's where Tony Romo played college football. It's where Jimmy Garoppolo played college football. But with that said, this year they're going through they are going through a coaching change. They did bring over an assistant from Northwestern, so he'll have some Big Ten experience. But I think with the first-year head coach, home opener, I think IU takes care of business, especially with inebriated fans in attendance.
True.
Retweet.
True. And the pause before their answer there was everyone was shaking their head. So
yeah,
the radio silence, everyone was shaking their head. But next week, September 14th, noon at Fox. So we've got, of course, they always put the Ohio State whooping, as it has tended to be on big national television, not just BTN, but Fox. We've got Ohio State at Fox, which everyone is very excited about. Everyone thinks that is a potential winnable game. I'll get your thoughts in a second. Ohio State, for them, it is sandwiched between two definitely cupcake games for them. So Ohio State has easy game, IU, then another easy game. So do you think Indiana gets their first loss or their first big upset in however many decades against Ohio State? Matt.
Oh, I was going to let Nithin go first. But yeah, I think this is a loss. This Ohio State team's just got way too much talent at almost every position. And I think it's really good for Ohio State that Ryan Day did get some head coaching experience last year, that Maryland game was shaky. If we can do what Maryland did to them last year, I think we'll be in a really good position. But I can't trust it until I see it, and I don't trust it yet, so I'm going to put this one as a loss.
Nithin.
All right. I'm going to need everybody in their cars. If you're listening, I need you to, buckle in. I need you to pull over. I need you to buckle in. If you're walking and listening to this, you need to stop for just a moment. Yeah, find a bench. I think IU pulls off the upset. I do. And make no mistake, it will be an upset. But this, to me, would not be a jaw-dropping shocker. IU's played Ohio State competitively the last few seasons. That's no surprise. This will be Ohio State's first road game of the season. Last year, Ohio State was miserable on the road, at least for their standard. This is a team that got crushed in West Lafayette. They were mediocre at best at Maryland. And, at Ohio State, at Michigan State, at Penn State, they won games. But at that point, those teams weren't as good as they were expected to be. I think Bloomington's going to be rocking for this one. As usual, it's going to be a noon kick. People are going to be fired up. And, Ohio State's got a lot of talent, but I think they have less talent than what they normally have. They lost Dwayne Haskins to the NFL. They lost Paris Campbell. They lost Nick Bosa. That's not easy talent to replace by week 3. By week 10, Ohio State might understand who their best players are and who maybe needs to take a redshirt season. But early on in the season, week 3, they're going to be experimenting on some stuff. Ryan Day is, still a raw head coach. I think IU, with their experience and with their belief, find a way to get the victory here.
I will have to agree with Matt, and for his reason itself too. I'm not going to believe it till I see it, basically. But I definitely agree with Nithin as well. This would not be a jaw-dropping. It would not be a surprise if Indiana were to win this game. I don't think. Of course, obviously, all of us are going to be rooting for that huge upset, but I definitely don't think, to Nithin's point, that it would be this big shock to the world if IU were to win. I can definitely see Indiana winning. I just don't think they will.
And that's fair. I mean, I would be surprised if IU won, but I wouldn't be stunned. I wouldn't be floored. This to me is it's not just that they're playing Ohio State. I also really like the timing when it's coming here. First road game for Ohio State, week 3. I think that helps the Hoosiers here.
Sure. Yeah. And which timing is also a big thing. Is Ohio State ready, or is Indiana going to be able to catch them off guard, or vice versa? So let's go on to Connecticut. September 21st. Both the time and the television network are to be announced, which most of these will be. But Connecticut, very bottom right now of the FBS. Is there any doubt on losing this game, or is this as winnable as Indiana can get it?
No, there's no doubt here. I will say Big Ten Network has been designated for this game. The timing is still to be determined.
Changed?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it will be on BTN. In fact, BTN's tailgate show will be in Bloomington for this one.
Huh.
If you're in the area. But no, as far as the game itself is concerned, UConn's not only on a downward trend here, they are very arguably the worst team in all of FBS. It's worse than Ball State, worse than some of these directional Michigan schools or whatever. I mean, we're talking about bottom of the barrel as far as UConn goes. What's interesting is that UConn does come off a bye before they play IU. Early on in the season, the Huskies actually take on Illinois in Connecticut, which is kind of a weird sort of back-to-back Big Ten situation they have going on there. But IU actually will be able to have a good amount of film to scout against UConn. I just think between the talent IU has and the depth, this is a pretty comfortable victory. I'm more comfortable they win this game than I think they win the Ball State game, for example.
Oh, sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think this is an easier game than the Eastern Illinois game. I think Eastern Illinois is a better football team than Connecticut is, and they have a new head coach.
Yep. I agree. All right, next game, Michigan State, September 28th at 3:30 or 4 o'clock. It's always weird when they do that, just the half-hour difference. The network to be determined. Michigan State plays Northwestern the week before Indiana, and Indiana is their homecoming. So we are their homecoming. And I think, honestly, going into Michigan State, no, they're not a top 5, top 10 team like they can be, but I don't think Indiana goes into Michigan State during their homecoming with crazy fans and pulls off a win. I still think Indiana is still very young. They're going to trip up a few games. I still think overall they're going to be a better team than last year, but not against Michigan State. Nithin, do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I do agree. I will say one thing. I think this is an environment where Michael Penix helps a lot more than Peyton Ramsey does. It's very possible that East Lansing's going to be cooler. It's going to be windier, and you're really going to have to fit the ball in some tight spaces. But with that said, Michigan State to me is a very, very tough team to play. This is a program that has been, at the top of the conference or close to it for the last decade or so. Mark D'Antonio is a really good coach. I know Michigan State had a kind of a slow finish to the end of last season, but this is a very just disciplined, defensively sound football team. So I think IU will suffer their first loss of the season in this matchup.
Yes, first loss for Nithin after starting out 4-0 for
That's right.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, this is a loss. I don't trust Michigan State on offense. This is going to be very low scoring, very close game. But I just think homecoming, home field advantage. Our running backs are going to get tired of running into a brick wall, and we're eventually going to lose this game. So that's going to be our second loss of the season for me.
Same. That's okay. We run into our tough opponent, we get tired, and then we have a break. Homecoming is next, but we have a bye with Hoosier Hysteria, so we get a week off, not just an away game like Hoosier Hysteria usually is. Bye week, then we will face Rutgers, which is our homecoming on October 12th, a noon game. The TV station is to be announced, but I'm fairly confident that would be an accessible game, probably BTN. The Rutgers has Michigan at Michigan before us, then a home against Maryland, and then Indiana. So they've got one very tough team, one pretty tough team, and then they've got Indiana. So they're coming off of a couple Big Ten games. Of course, Indiana coming off of a bye. I still think Indiana is enough above Rutgers to where we don't have the unspeakable acts of football playing a few years ago to repeat itself, to where I think this is another game that is hopefully for Indiana a game that we can annually say that it is a win. Do you agree or disagree, Matt?
I agree. This is a win. I think Rutgers is almost as bad as UConn at a certain point. So, yeah, it should be a win.
Anything different, Nithin?
No, that's fair. IU should be able to control the game in this one and end up with a victory.
All right, Nithin is one game away from going bowling right after our not even at our midway point right now. So before we go on to our final 6 games, Matt, give us your social media post and social media shout out for the week.
So social media shout out for the week, or just a post this week, is from Jeff Rabjohns. He tweeted out that Archie Miller was doing a talk at Evansville High School tonight, which is where Christian Lander plays. I think it's just ironic that happens. But anyways, he was talking about Romeo Langford, and it says, Romeo Langford's been back on campus a ton since he's been drafted. I said Langford sleeps on Rob Finney's couch while he's back in Bloomington because he wants to be around his teammates. And that made me want to cry because that's the sweetest thing I've ever seen as a multimillionaire sleeping on a couch because he wants to be near his friends.
That also, I love how Rob was not like, oh, you should take to the couch, Romeo. You've got an NBA career to look after. No, Romeo, you're taking the couch. I'm getting my own bed.
But that's great because we heard all these stupid rumors last year about how he wasn't getting along with the team. And no, he was here. He had fun. He liked it. That's great. And I'm sure he'll talk to a lot of his friends and younger friends that are recruits about his wonderful time in Bloomington. So
yeah, that hopefully Juwan squashed those rumors about a poor team chemistry on the Hoosier Hysterics interview. So
dumb.
Yeah, but follow us at Indiana HQ on Twitter, Instagram too. Check us out on Instagram. We've got some cool stuff there. Indiana.HQ. Pretty easy to find. Go look us up. Follow us there. All right, moving on. At Maryland. So we just had our homecoming game against Rutgers. We travel to Maryland on October 19th. Maryland's got at Rutgers, at Purdue, then a home against IU, then at Maryland, and then at Minnesota. So they've got one home game in an entire month. And typically, this would be a situation where I would be like, all right, it's not pencil in a loss, but I would be very looking at that as a not a trap game, but a game that Indiana, it would be hard for them to win any game against the road. But I'm just not sold on Maryland. I've heard a lot of people talk about Maryland being this team that's going to play pretty well this year. I just am not sold on it. And I'm not going to go into too much detail right now, but I've just have this feeling, and they're new coaches, and I'm just not sold on Maryland. Plus, their home field advantage is worse than IU was, even when in 2013 and 2014, when their home field advantage was terrible. More of Nithin's years that he was at school, which is awful. Like the people on campus now, a home game with poor attendance is probably a very good game of attendance in like 2012, 13, 14. So Maryland was worse than that. They somehow had less people than the basketball band at IU in their entire student section when I went to the game 2 years ago. So I'm not sold on the home atmosphere against Maryland. I'm not sold on Maryland. If that doesn't say that I'm thinking Indiana's going to win this game, which is a game they need to win, by the way, anyway, Indiana gets a victory. Nithin.
You know, it's funny, Noah, not only did you comment about the sort of the fan engagement at Maryland, but if you are into the wagering, right now the over-under as far as Maryland wins this season is concerned is just 4. I mean, Vegas is predicting Maryland to just win 4 games this year. By the way, they think IU's going to win 6.5, which, you know, just keep that in mind as we go through this.
I've always liked Las Vegas. It's a great place.
Well, clearly they're not IU football fans, that's for sure. I mean, as far as, you know, following the team on a year-to-year basis. But as far as Maryland goes, as bad as all that seems, I think IU somehow trips up here. And Noah, you kind of touched on it. You know, it's a road game in the Big Ten. Maryland's playing this one home game in a stretch of weeks there. Anthony McFarland is an awesome running back. He torched IU last season. Josh Jackson's a solid QB from Virginia Tech who transferred to Maryland and is starting now. I think IU trips up in this one. So, yeah, I have them beating Ohio State but losing to Maryland. Fancy that.
I have them winning. This is the one game that changed in my prediction thanks to Mike Penix. I think the explosive plays that Mike Penix will be able to bring to the offense is going to win us this game, an away game at Maryland against, like you said, I think an underrated Maryland team, according to Vegas. I like this Maryland team a lot. So I'm going to say this one's a win for us.
No, I think they're overrated even at that. I am not sold on Maryland. I will eat my words, but I am not sold on Maryland whatsoever this year. And I even live right here, right 20 minutes, 30 minutes outside of Maryland. I'm sorry, Maryland fans. I grew up liking you, but I am just not sold on Maryland this year. So, Indiana, you better cover my butt when playing this game at least. But we go on to at Nebraska, the 26th of October. Again, all of these times and TV stations are to be announced, which actually we've gotten more times and stations announced earlier than normal. Usually it's the week before. But Nebraska's got home against OSU, home against Northwestern, at Minnesota. Then you've got IU, they're a bye, and then us. So they've got they've played some tough opponents already. Again, I think Nebraska's the team that everyone just has a big question mark. They could be really good, but they could be overrated. I had it as a loss. I could see that going both ways. I just don't think going into Nebraska, a place that we haven't been in a long time, I'm having it as a loss. Just any road game is hard to get. I think their one road game that they're going to be able to get is against Maryland, so I got it as a loss. What about you, Matt?
Same thing. Same reason. Bye week. Scott Frost. Great home field advantage. Man. I like the bye week is what sold it for me. If they didn't have a bye week before us, I might have been like, I think we got a shot. But I give Scott Frost 2 weeks to prepare. Like we saw what he did with UCF to Auburn, and a good Auburn team just absolutely destroyed them with UCF a couple of years ago. So give Scott Frost a couple weeks to prepare, and I really believe in him as a head coach. So I got Nebraska winning this one.
Matt and I are 100% the same. So
I'm sorry.
I agree with you guys on this one. Adrian Martinez is a dangerous quarterback as well, dual threat. He's going to cause IU a lot of problems, especially considering they're coming off a bye. So I've got Nebraska winning this one, and that means IU's now 5-3 in my book. Yeah,
for all of us,
all of us,
okay. 5-3, 2-3 in the conference. So still one win away from a bowl game, and against Northwestern, home game November 2nd. Again, time and place, TV to be announced. They've got Northwestern plays Ohio State, Iowa, at IU, and then Purdue. So they've got one away game against IU sandwiched in between all of those home games. I wrote down, is it a possible trap game for them, ? Because they've got a big game against Ohio State. Iowa's always pretty decent. They've got an important game against Purdue. Do they just overlook us? ? I don't think so. I think are becoming what did Matt and I had them at 5-2, being one win away from going bowling. I think they're 5. No, they were 5-2, then 5-3. Yeah. I think they're one win away from going bowling. Our hopes still linger. I think we lose to Northwestern from a lot of the reasons. I really liked your breakdown from both of you guys in the episode, so don't give too much away. You have to go back and listen to the other episode if you didn't do it. But I have this loss against Northwestern. Nithin.
Yeah, same. To me, this is Northwestern team is just too good of a program. And, if IU wins, then great. I'll like it when I see it. I'm less confident they beat Northwestern than they beat Ohio State. I don't know why, but that's just the way I feel.
I said at Northwestern. I'm sorry. It's a home game.
No, home game, but yeah, still.
Yes. Matt?
Yeah, I like Northwestern in this one.
Yeah, okay. So we all have the same outcome there, getting closer to 500. At Penn State, November 16th. Penn State will play at Michigan State, at Minnesota, home against IU, at Ohio State. They've got a lot of big road games. I think they see this game as they just need to get a win against a gauntlet of teams. Minnesota for the gauntlet, but Michigan State and Ohio State, all of those games are away. They really need to win their home games this year if they want to have any chance at some big bowl. So I honestly don't think there's much of any chance that Indiana wins this game, especially given the circumstances, even though Penn State is not what it has been the past year or two maybe. But do you agree or disagree, Matt?
I completely disagree. In fact, this is another one of the games that changed. I thought we were going to lose this game. Mike Penix at quarterback gives us those explosive plays that will eventually break the back of Penn State. We will win in Happy Valley for like the second time in 8 years. This is going to happen. We're going to beat Penn State. I actually believe this completely. That means we would go bowling because we win away at Penn State. I genuinely like our chances in this game because I don't trust James Franklin as a coach at all. I think he's completely and utterly overrated. This is a trap game for them. It's right for their away trip to Ohio State. They're going to be looking to beat Ohio State because they hate Ohio State so much. because that Penn State-Ohio State rivalry. I think we go in to Happy Valley and we just run them over, and they're completely unprepared. We win this game.
There's Matt's Maryland for me.
How about that? Well, look, one thing that does support your case, Matt, is that IU is coming off a bye week of their own going into this Penn State game. So they'll have 2 weeks to prepare for the Nittany Lions. Now, one thing I wanted to mention, IU beat Penn State here in Bloomington a few years ago. They haven't won in Happy Valley.
Oh, sorry. My bad.
So, well, I guess it would be a first for you. I don't think it happens. Penn State's a really good football team normally. I mean, we haven't seen this year's version, but I think IU trips up and falls at Penn State, which means I have them at 5-5 through 10 games. Business as usual.
I think losing Trace McSorley is too much for them. So I also add that. So
I just don't think the one home game that they have basically in the month of November when they have great home crowds, I think that's still too much for Indiana. Plus, Indiana never plays very well in Happy Valley. So, all right, Michigan, November 23rd, both time and television to be announced. Michigan's got home against Michigan State, at Indiana, home against Ohio State. Again, is this a trap game right after Michigan State, right before the big Ohio State rival game? I still don't think so. I'm maybe not as high on Michigan as the entire national rankings, maybe not in the top 5 like some people have them, but I still don't think this is the year Indiana beats Michigan. They beat Ohio State before Michigan for me. Nithin?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This IU team, even in their losses, I think they're going to play very close games. I don't think IU is going to get blown out in any game this season, in all honesty, except maybe Nebraska. Now, here's the thing with Michigan. I think the Wolverines are just too good. And with that said, even though it's going to be senior night or day at Memorial Stadium, I think IU suffers one of those back-breaking losses once again. They're on the cusp of making a bowl game, right? We said they're at 5 wins. I think Michigan just has a little bit too much, and they come away with like a 3-point win or something in Bloomington.
Matt?
Yeah, I think this is a loss. I think this is the best team we play all year. So
Matt is, I think we're all... Nope, Matt is 6-5. I need to read. I'll do this in a second.
I'm 6-5.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. The last game of the season, November 30th. Again, of course, it's that awful time that right after Thanksgiving where no one's ever there, which thankfully both Indiana and Purdue are starting to talk about potentially moving that game, which I think is definitely something to listen for. We'll talk about it in the later episode. But Purdue's got at Northwestern, at Wisconsin, and then home against Indiana. Now, that's not great news because a bunch of away games, they finally get to come home for Thanksgiving, but get to be comfy, or at least home at Purdue, more or less, for Thanksgiving. But this is my big thing. They are 8 games since their very, very early bye. They play 8 straight games before Indiana's game. So this will be their 9th straight game.
That's not true. No, I think they have a bye week between Northwestern and Wisconsin.
I thought it was
at the end of the season. I think they have a couple.
I thought it was earlier than that. Check that. But anyway, I still don't. Regardless, and I probably have them winning this game just because I want to break the cycle and I don't want the same outcome to happen 3 years in a row for me being 5-6, 1 game away, playing Purdue for a bowl game. Same situation for Purdue. Purdue taking it away from us. I just can't do that, even if I think Purdue's going to win. So I have this as a win, more or less enough for that. But I do think Indiana goes 6-6. I really do. Wherever the games come from, I think Indiana is going to finally be able to get 6-6 this year. Matt?
I also think we go 6-6 when we lose this game. Purdue's going to be good in football this year, and I think we're going to, again, surprise some people. Jeff Brom's a hell of a head coach. So this is 6-6 for us.
So, Matt, when you and I were talking a few weeks ago, I actually had this as a win. I'm flipping on this. I think IU falls in West Lafayette. I'm sorry, guys. Like, as talented and as deep as this IU team is compared to previous years, I don't know. I have a tough time seeing them go into West Lafayette and win this game against a really good Purdue team. Again, I think it's going to be another one of those one-possession games. But at the end of the day, like, it's Purdue, and they've made back-to-back bowl games. They've got a really talented football team. Rondale Moore is awesome. So I had IU defeating Ohio State in week 3, but still finishing 5-7. So really, what is life?
So wait, you have us starting out 4-0 and beating Ohio State, and then you have us losing 5 straight games to end the season.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing is, look, maybe one of those toss-up games go IU's way, but like I could literally see them lose 6 one-score games. And
I absolutely agree. I think we go 6-6, and I couldn't tell you. I told you where the 6 wins are going to come from, but if they came from different places, they came from different games, I would not be surprised. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we went to Michigan State and won. I would be surprised if Nebraska and won, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we went to Nebraska and lost by 30. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's gonna be a nail biting roller coaster season for sure. I think they've got those 4 wins locked in, but after that, who knows really?
Yeah.
Both of us were right. I don't know how this schedule works out, and this is also, of course, very bad podcasting, very bad radio. They don't play a game on September 21st. They go from the 14th to the 28th without a game, but then they go from November 9th to November 23rd without a game. So I don't know how that works with Purdue.
Potentially. I mean, I think some teams do have a couple of bye weeks. I think IU has a couple as well.
IU has 2 bye weeks
in their schedule. So I don't know how the scheduling works necessarily, but that's just the way Purdue's and IU schedules have worked out this year.
So yes, but I still think that's a win. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be a Nithin hater where he goes 4-0 and then loses the rest of them basically. So
wow.
All right, so both Matt and I ended up couple differences. One difference, but we both ended up 6-6, 3-6 in the conference. What did you end up with, Nithin? You were 5-7,
5-7 with 2-7. Yep.
Ugh, man, I don't
like
that.
I know. Well, and again, what's crazy is Vegas has them at 6.5. So I'm not going to put money on it, but hey, look, if I'm wrong, it's probably because IU play better.
Yeah. All right, let's quickly go into a Ball State preview. I know this is a long podcast, but we've got a lot of content to cover. Ball State preview, I'll just give my rundown. We'll do offense, defense, and then we'll quickly wrap it up. So just add on to anything I have, both of you guys. If not, we'll just try and make it brief. Offense, they lost their starting QB and their starting running back from last year, who contributed to their offense that averaged 409 yards per game. Most of it was passing, not much of it was running. Nonetheless, they still lost those 2 starting roles. But Drew Plitt went in, which is their now starting quarterback. So he got a lot of time in when Riley Neal, last year their quarterback, Riley Neal, got injured. So Drew Plitt does have a lot of experience. They also have another backup freshman QB that is playing very well. So their QB position is, yes, they lost their starting QB, but they've got some good QBs playing. They've also got 8 starters back on the offense. Wide receivers, this is their money position. If they're going to win games this year, it's because of the wide receivers. They've got Justin Hall and Riley Miller are 2 of the MAC's best receivers, so the QB just needs to get them the ball. You also have Johannes Tyler and Malik Dunner, who have made a lot of plays as well. So my thing, at least for the offense, for Ball State to win, they do well when they get the ball down the field. Their passing is on point down the field, so Indiana's secondary is going to be really big on this, which I think all of us are confident on. But basically, the only way I think the offense for Ball State is going to win is that they're going to have to move the ball down the field. Anything to add, Nithin?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head as far as their offense is concerned. They're a pass-first offense. It's going to be fun to see how new play caller Kane Womack dials up pressure. I think it would be a good idea to put a little bit of confusion into new quarterback Drew Plitt's head. If they can do that, then you'll see the turnovers and you'll see the frustration coming through on Ball State's end.
Matt?
Yep. I think this is going to be too much for Ball State's offense. I think our defense is going to be too much for them to handle. We should take good care of business.
All right, in Ball State's defense, they do return 9 starters. So overall, their defense is very similar to last season, but they gave up 450 yards per game and 32 points per game last season. So their defense was, to say the least, not very good last year. Their defense has and I don't mean this in a negative way, they do not have a good defensive line. They've got one starter that is a key, but most of their pass rush last year came from the linebackers. Their defensive line got eaten up. That's basically where a lot of those yards came in. Just a lot of holes there. Where their money is, if anything in the defense, is their secondaries. Their safeties are the best. I looked it up. They're some of their best athletes on the entire team are their two safeties. So they've got pretty decent secondary. So I would look for, of course, Indiana to run the ball with Stevie Scott and maybe some of our 20,000 backup running backs that are very good. In addition to their secondary, their linebackers are actually pretty good. They've got really good linebackers. Having three of the best athletes on their defense, period, are the linebackers. So it's really their linebacking core, and then their safeties overall are where it's going to be. But they struggle with the rushing defense, of course, as you can tell if they don't have a very good defensive line. So, like I said, Indiana's going to take advantage of that. I think they can take advantage of that by pounding the ball, which opens up the pass game. Hopefully they're able to take it that way. They don't have to force any passes. They just run the ball, get downfield, move the clock, and then that opens up the passing game. Matt.
Yep, I agree. I think IU will run it down their throats. I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe one or two running backs have over 100 yards games in this game. It's the perfect defense for Michael Penix to get started on, in my opinion. He's going to be able to test the corners out on the side. When he throws it over the middle, it's going to be dangerous, like it normally is when you play in the Big Ten. So he's going to have to learn that real fast, and then he's going to be able to rely on the running game to bail him out when he needs to. I don't see this defense letting us score anything less than 28 points on them. So.
If there's one takeaway for you guys from this Ball State game going into Saturday, it's that as much as excitement there is around the Michael Penix decision, IU is going to win by running the football on Saturday. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Stevie Scott, Samson James, Ronnie Walker, Cole Guest, all those guys are going to get the ball a ton. Penix will use his legs as well in the run game. So that's how IU is going to win on Saturday, and probably in week 2 as well. But we'll talk about that next week.
Yep. And just closing thoughts, Matt.
Okay, yeah, great. Just one thought. If you see a lot of mistakes, false starts, holdings, moving, illegal movement, illegal shift, don't worry about that. It's the first week. It happens. It's sloppy. Also, it's the first game in a new offensive system for most of these guys. New stadium. Like you're gonna have some issues, and it's a first start for a freshman. Give it some time. Like, don't get too frustrated. There's going to be mistakes, but look for the bright spots in this game. We should win this game pretty easily.
There's a full-scale preview that you guys can read over on IndianaHQ.com. I would highly recommend it because I wrote it.
Exactly. Yeah. Any closing thoughts besides that, Nithin?
Nope, that's it.
Yep. It's going to be a great game. Football's back. The NFL's the NFL's just not too long after, just a week away. So
we survived the off season.
We survived the off season. We're all ready for it. Hopefully next week we'll be able to talk about Indiana going 1-0, which will be great. Which I think honestly, yes, they get a win. Hopefully they can win sort of kind of comfortably, so it's not a nail biter game, which some people think. But I think it'll be a positive, despite all of the pre-mistakes that Matt mentioned. Which I totally agree with. It's not going to be the best game played for all the circumstances Matt said, but if we can win by 10 or 14 at least, then I think that'll be a good first win for the season. But that about wraps it up for our 103rd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you guys so much for joining us, especially on this longer episode. And thank you to that live audience, of course, for always coming out and supporting us in that chat section. We will be back next Monday for another edition of the Hoosier Sound Off. Check those out if you haven't yet. Great 3-minute tidbits of just sports updates for Indiana. Like we said, news and updates come from Twitter, so subscribe to our show so you don't miss anything. Most importantly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review on iTunes or Facebook. Tell a friend, share our links. Your support is that's really the only way how we grow this podcast, so we can reach all those passionate IU fans such as yourself. But, as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.